Hello everyone, you're listening to the Earful Tower podcast. My name's Oliver G. This bonus Thursday episode is brought to you by Fat Tire Tours. Use the code word EARFUL to get 10% off your tours and hang around at the end of the episode. I'll be talking to you about how I did a skip the line trip up to the top of the Eiffel Tower and I went full tourist and I loved it. But let me tell you a little bit about today's episode. I really like this. I like this chat. I think you're going to like it too. You'll feel, I think, that it sounds like a chat between two old friends, except believe it or not, Anne and I had never met or really been in contact before, but I think we just hit it off. So if you're not familiar with the name of Ann Mah, you should be. She's a writer who's done a couple of books you might have heard of, Mastering the Art of French Eating in 2013, and more recently, The Lost Vintage, a novel, and that has just come out in paperback, and that's what we talk about in this episode, but it's a bestseller, so you probably have heard about her. But before we get into the chat, it's a really wide-ranging chat as well. We talked about all kinds of stuff. We went all over the place in just half an hour. But I wanted to say, if you are a supporter of this show via Patreon, if you're in the book club, if you're a book club member, I got good news for you. Anne was generous enough to give 5 copies of this new book. I'm going to raffle them off, let's say by the end of the month. August 31st, I'll pick 5 winners, and you'll get the book sent to you. So keep that in mind while you're listening to think about signing up on Patreon to support the Eiffel Tower. There's all sorts of... Oh, you know what? There is another bonus. And you'll hear at the end of this episode, I said, Anne, do you want to hang around for a bonus chat for the book club? And she said, why not? So we had a good old book conversation and answered all the questions from the book club, which you can find out if you go on patreon.com/The Earful Tower. But enough about that. Here comes the episode with Ann Mah and I. Don't forget to check out her newest book, The Lost Vintage. And, let's get into it. Let's do it. Ann Mah, welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
It's really nice to meet you.
It's great to meet you, Oliver.
It kind of feels like I already know you.
I'm a huge fan of your podcast.
Oh,
so
wow.
This is really, really a treat for me.
Well, it's a treat for me too. This is wonderful. You know what? I'm even in a better mood because when I was walking in, I was listening to Earth, Wind and Fire, the disco music, and it put me in a really good mood.
Awesome.
So everything's happening. Yeah. How you doing anyway?
Good.
It feels like you and I have like a few mutual friends as well, I think.
I'm sure we do.
Yeah.
The English-speaking community here is not super big, so...
Do you think... I think a lot of people probably think it's like a... because so many expats and stuff have come here forever. Mm-hmm. People probably think it's bigger than it is. What do you think?
I think there are a lot of people who move in and out, but like a core group who is just sticking it out.
Sure. A lot of transient people. Mm-hmm. And that's you.
It is.
Right. And so you, I hear currently you're just popping through for the summer, right?
That's right.
Okay. And enjoying it so far?
Yes, I love it here. But the thing is, we don't really pop through because we own a home here. Right. So our popping through is a lot of, getting drain cleaner and fixing things in our apartment. Man. Yeah, that's really romantic. That's the romantic side of life
that's
here.
The real Paris, isn't it? Drain cleaner. Do you know the word for drain cleaner in French?
Well, it's déboucheur.
Oh my goodness. Once I went to I had to get a shower head from one of the shops that sell shower heads. Do you know how hard it is to explain a shower head when you're learning French? And then when I finally found it, I don't know what it is, but there's one word for it. It's like a really long, stupid word. And the guy's like, oh, you mean this? Someone's going to write in now and tell me what the word is for.
Isn't it like, I can't remember, but it's the same thing as the flower can. The watering can?
Yeah,
I think it's the same word.
It could be. Should we look it up? No, we'll leave it. We'll leave it.
Well, a special treat for someone who wants to inform us.
The trick is, me and Anne, we both know that word. We're just making sure everyone at home is listening. But you're in Paris. I'm in Paris. You've got the book's just come out in paperback.
That's right.
And I'm holding it in my hand, The Lost Vintage. And we're going to talk about it. But I reckon we get to it in a second. And first we talk a little bit about kind of you and the idea of you must get... How often is it that people bring up Julia Child straight away?
A lot.
Yeah?
I mean, my life is pretty similar in that she's 6 feet tall and so am I. Just kidding. No. She was the wife of a diplomat and so am I. And we both love France. We both love food. And so that she's been a role model, an icon for those who are Francophiles and food lovers and also those who are constantly reinventing themselves.
Like Madonna.
Madonna,
You know,
exactly.
So I want to know, before I came to France, I didn't know anything about Julia Child. I don't know if she's huge in America or huge everywhere. Do you know much? Have you researched much into her?
Yeah, well, she's huge in America because I would say about 10, 15 years ago, she published a memoir of her. Well, she's huge in America from the 1960s when her television show revolutionized American cooking. So she was one of the first televised shows to prepare food live on camera.
How cool.
And it was French cuisine. She really introduced regular Americans to the concept of traditional French cuisine made from the ingredients that you could find in an American supermarket.
Right. And she was quite a character, right?
Absolutely.
If she was around today, she'd be a YouTube star, don't you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think she's sort of beyond that. First of all, she studied here cooking in France when her husband was posted to the embassy as a diplomat, and she was very serious about, she was quite didactic about it. She really wanted the true, authentic recipe, and didn't really accept any substitutions or modernizations.
Right.
So she was very serious about her recipes, but also wove into her message, I think, was the lifestyle of food in France and the table and the importance of, taking a break to eat your meal instead of eating it in front of the computer.
Sure. How interesting. And then so you find yourself coming to France with a husband who's a diplomat. And this isn't so much about the lost vintage. This is more about...
This is about my memoir called Mastering the Art of French Eating, which is a play on Julia Child's famous cookbook, Mastering the Art of French Cooking.
Right.
And in that book, it tells the story of a year I spent here in Paris while my husband was sent to Baghdad. I was lucky enough to stay here. And I used that time to travel around France and explore 10 different regions and tell the history of 10 signature dishes of France.
What's your favorite of all the regions?
I have so many favorites.
We need one. My favorite question, if you had to go back to one and then you're being sent out of France forever, which would it be? It
would probably be Provence.
Really?
I really love the produce there, the bounty, the olive oil.
Yeah.
The fruits and vegetables, the fish.
It's got a great name as well, don't you think?
It does.
Provence. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you know if there's a good time to visit it?
I think the spring and summer are the best times. I haven't been in the winter ever, I don't think, but I went once in the fall and it rained for about 48 hours
really?
straight. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those summer cities. I was down there at the tail end of fall. And I could feel the cold and the wind chasing me, and we headed north to get away from it. But I could sense the
Mistral.
Yeah, the Mistral. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's skip ahead now. And I'm holding in my hand a national bestseller.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations!
Thank you.
That's amazing.
It is.
I've got a national bestseller sitting right in front of me. The Lost Vintage, and people are probably thinking, "What the heck is a lost vintage?" And people are probably thinking, "You've done your memoir. Now what?"
So The Lost Vintage is it's a novel. The Lost Vintage that the title refers to is a vintage of Burgundy wine that is lost during the war. The book is about a young woman, a contemporary woman who is a sommelier and who is striving with all her might to pass a very prestigious wine exam. It's called the Master of Wine. It's one of the highest recognitions in the wine world, and the exam is very difficult. You have to successfully identify 12 different wines blind, and not just the varietal, but also, the vineyard, the conditions it was produced in, the year.
Are you good at that?
No, not at all. But I did take classes to be able to write about it. And those classes taught me that I'm definitely not a wine expert.
No, I'm useless at that stuff. Do you know how annoying it is to live in France and be useless at tasting and smelling food and drink?
You can buy, they have a sensory, a little kit with different little vials that helps you identify smells.
Right.
Have you seen that?
No, but you know what? I sometimes think, people who can't see very well, they can wear glasses, and there's nothing, that's normal. If you can't see very well, they'll put you, you have to see. We'll give you glasses. If you can't hear, you get the hearing aid. I can't smell very well. No one cares.
Really, you feel like you have a poor sense of smell?
No, I know I have
you
poor,
know.
and taste. And I feel like if people cared more, they'd give me the equivalent of glasses for my nose. You know what I mean? I did a, have you done cupping? Coffee cupping?
Yeah, I know it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I did that. It was a shout out to the Patreon supporters who came along with me, but we went and did it at Katoom Coffee Shop, and I couldn't smell anything. And they go, just smell this and sip this. You'll be feeling the strawberries in there. I was like, what? You guys actually taste strawberry? But so it makes me feel better that you're not great at it either.
Well,
and you've written a best-selling book.
I'm definitely not a wine expert.
Right.
But I know what kinds of wines I like, and I'm sure you do too.
Sure. Yeah, the expensive ones.
Exactly. The ones from Burgundy.
So and it's yeah, right. And it says on the front here, from the author of Sarah's Key. Mm-hmm. If you enjoyed my Sarah's Key, then this wonderful book is for you. How did you get that quote? How does that happen?
Tatiana de Rosnay is a wonderful author. Sarah's Key. Have you read Sarah's Key?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, Sarah's Key is a riveting story.
They made a movie out of it,
They
right?
also made a movie.
Yeah, which is about, for people who haven't heard of it, it's all World War II. And
it's about the Vélodrome d'hiver and about the roundup that happened in Paris
that's right.
In 1943,
Yeah, so the Paris cops taking the Jews. Yep.
Exactly. It was when France turned on its own people and used its own police force and military to round up Jewish people and send them to the camps.
Yes. And so Tatiana, I'm always interested in this stuff. She's written a quote for your book. Do you just call her up and be, hey, Tat?
I mean, I had known her. I had never met her, but we had known of each other through the American Library in Paris, which is one of my favorite places here in Paris.
Sure.
I used to work there.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. We had Grant Rosenberg on this show once. I say I had him on.
Grant, Grant is awesome, but he's now at the Columbia Center for the Imagination.
Right, that's right. He's probably listening, right?
He probably is.
Hi, Grant.
Hey.
Grant. Yeah.
Actually, Grant helped me connect with Tatiana.
Cool.
And I wrote her an email, and she very, very generously gave me that quote, which I think, it has been such a huge support for the book.
Right. It's interesting, isn't it? On the cover of a book, those quotes. I always wonder. I don't know if you.
It's basically who the author knows.
Is it mostly about that stuff? Okay, cool. Okay, maybe one day I'll hit you up for a quote.
Yeah, with pleasure.
Anyway, listen. Back to Paris. Back to the book. Let's talk about Paris for a little bit. May I ask which arrondissement your house is in?
It's in the 7th.
This is written about in your last book, right?
It is.
Right, because someone wrote in and asked if you still are living in the same house you talked about in the book.
No. So when I wrote the book and when I was the time period that the book Mastering the Art of French Eating covers is when we lived here when my husband was assigned to the embassy in Paris.
Right.
And that apartment was in the 6th. And it was right next to the Marché Biologique.
Okay, right. Mm-hmm. And now did you say you're in the 7th?
Now we're in the 7th.
So what's that like? I'm quite fascinated by the 7th.
Are you?
It feels like a different planet to me a little bit.
So I knew the 7th very well because I had worked at the American Library.
Sure.
And when we started to look for an apartment to buy, it was completely impossible. The market is still crazy. There are very few options. The 6th where we lived, which I love deeply because I know it so well.
The stunning 6th.
Completely out of our budget.
Yeah.
So we started looking around. We looked everywhere. We looked in this neighborhood. We looked in Belleville. We're very close to. We have very close friends who own a cafe in the 20th.
Which cafe? Let's give them a shout out.
It's called the Mistral.
This keeps coming up.
Metro Pyrénées.
Okay. Oh, is it right on the corner?
It is. It's right outside the metro.
Yeah, I know that one. That's cool.
Yep. And that's where my husband lived when he studied here and after university. So he's a big fan of the 20th, but we ended up in the 7th, right very close to the American Library, a neighborhood I knew because I had worked there.
Sure.
And
that's beautiful down there.
It's very lovely.
Yeah. Those streets where the American Library is, those narrow ones with the Eiffel Tower where it looks so big when you're down one end of it.
It really does.
It's like a depth perception trick or something.
You're just in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah. Everything down there is in the shadow of that. Yeah.
And it's very village. It's like a little village.
People say that about, I think, do you feel that that's true about a lot of Paris?
I do.
Yeah. people say Paris is a village. I'm not so sure about that, but more it feels like there's maybe
Its neighborhoods
yeah,
are.
yeah.
But I feel more villagey there than I did in the 6th.
How interesting. What do you think that made?
Well, I think it's all the 6th, especially now, not so much when I was living there, but especially now, has been really colonized by luxury stores.
Okay, right. That makes it hard to feel villagey,
It
doesn't
does.
it? Yeah.
The Hermès around the corner.
You know what? I think something that I think is very French. The bakers, for example, that'll remember you if you go to a regular bakery, and that makes you feel like you're in a village.
It's true.
You know, like I live up in Montmartre, and I have a pretty regular baker that I go to, and I went on a holiday for 3 weeks, and then when I came back, not even the one serving me, but a woman that was sort of walking past, she goes, "They've returned." And I thought it was amazing. I was like, I didn't even tell her that we were going, but we weren't there. And obviously they know that people are going on holidays, but I'm going to be a customer for life.
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. It really builds loyalty. Well, that's how my husband met his friends who own the cafe in the 20th. 2 brothers who worked, their parents owned the cafe and they were behind the counter, and he just started going there every day after classes and would have like a beer on his way home from, whatever, and started chatting. And actually that's how he learned French, was
really?
Sitting at that cafe. He had no money at the time. He was a student. So he used to write their chalkboard menus, and they would
in exchange for drinks. I love
or
that
food.
story.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And they are our closest French friends, and they're Aveyronnais, from the Aveyron.
Yep.
Which most cafe owners are. I talk about that in Mastering the Art of French Eating. And so we've gone to Aveyron to visit their, ancestral home.
That's so wonderful. That's so wonderful. Unfortunately, though, I'm gonna change the tone of the conversation for a second, talking about French people, because I saw on Twitter the other day, you wrote a story about what sounded like a very unpleasant experience in Giverny. Can you tell me the story?
Sure. So we were in Giverny for the day, visiting Monet's garden. My parents were visiting, and we took a day trip. I was also with my daughter, who is mixed race. She is half Asian, like me. I'm Asian, and her father is white. So we were at the restaurant of the Fondation Monet. It's called Les Nymphéas.
Okay.
And the waiter, as we were paying, looked at her and looked at me and said, "Is that your daughter?" And I don't remember how he broached it, but he said, basically his main question was, "Why doesn't your daughter look like you?" And then he pulled his eyes, with the corners of his eyes, into squints with his fingers.
Right.
And I said, "Well, she's my daughter." And he said, "Yes, but why doesn't she have the same eyes as you?" And again, he made the gesture. And in the moment, I was so shocked and flustered and tongue-tied that I just repeated, "Well, she's my daughter," and we left. Wow. And of course, I was very angry afterwards, and I was really angry with him for having the audacity to approach me in that way. Sure. But also, I was angry with myself for not being able to rise to the occasion and really express myself.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't even know what to say. Why? Like, was he speaking English or French?
No, he was speaking in French.
Okay, that's weird. Like, why? It doesn't is that something that happens? That has happened to you before in France?
It has happened to me. But the interesting thing is, these things really have only started happening to me since my daughter, who's almost 6, was born.
Really?
So something about being out with children, being out with a kid, unleashes this in people. We were just on the Eurostar in July, and the guy, the server at the cafe car, asked me, "Oh, is that your daughter? Is she mixed? Is she mixed race?" And I just, maybe it's a European thing, maybe it's more of a French thing. In the United States, I don't encounter this type of question. In England, where we spend a fair amount of time because my parents live there, we don't encounter this type of question. Yeah. It just seems to be an obsession with race. And
how odd. I'm kind of lost for words. I don't really know even I heard that French people like to talk to people about their kids in general. Is that something that you've noticed more in France than in America? I mean, I don't have kids, but I hear that French people will often give advice about what to do with a baby.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. If if a baby is not covered, or once we were at the park and she was wearing a dress, and some grandmother was like, "Oh, I never send them in a dress because they just trip over their dresses." And there's a lot of unsolicited advice, but this wasn't advice.
No,
this was, and it just, to me, it surprised me also because the Giverny Monet's house is a huge tourist attraction, and the crowds there on a Sunday morning at 9:30 in August, you would not believe. And there was a large, and they were international tourists, and a large portion of them were Asian tourists because Monet had a very deep interest in Japan and Japanese woodblock prints.
Yep.
And
there's dozens of them in his very house.
Yes, exactly. And so it attracts a huge amount of not just international tourists, but tourists from Asia. And the very restaurant we were eating at, there were several tables with Asian tourists. So that someone who works in this international setting could behave in this way was shocking to me.
I can totally understand. What an unusual experience. Mm-hmm. What a horrible experience.
It was terrible. It really ruined my whole day, and really, sent me into sort of an existential crisis about where I belong or where I'm accepted.
Where do you feel accepted in the world in terms of the fact that you're in a diplomat family? We were talking about home before. Where's home?
Well, that's a really hard... I mean, home is technically here. This is where we own a home, and this is where we keep returning to. Yeah. But I think the place where I feel most at home anywhere in the world, where I just feel like I will never be questioned for who I am, is New York City.
I had a feeling you were going to say New York City. New York City is wild, huh? Mm-hmm. Everyone can be their own person there. I just feel everyone is their own person, and for that reason, it's not part of the culture to question anyone for who they are. Right. I'm kind of frightened by New York City.
Are you?
Yeah, I don't know. I've been there. I went and stayed in Brooklyn and in Harlem. Mm-hmm. I spent 3 days in each of those places and wandered everywhere. And I was like, this city's going to chew up and spit out a young man like me.
I don't think that's true.
I
think that you could thrive in New York.
Really?
Yeah, seriously.
What's the secret to thriving in New York?
I think it is just being who you want to be and accepting that others are who they are. New York has one of the things I love about New York, it has the most languages spoken, I think, of any major city.
Oh, I love languages. Mm-hmm. Maybe I should give it another go.
Like over 150 languages.
Really? Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, that's fascinating. Mm-hmm. Except it's stupidly expensive.
It's too hard. That's true.
Kind of like Paris as well.
Absolutely. New York also suffers from the luxury stores moving.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Plus the old Airbnb thing, it's too expensive.
Definitely.
I should do a house swap.
Yes.
That's what I should do.
Yeah.
Anyone in New York, get in touch. What I want to talk about as well, we've talked about your books, we talked about you a little bit. Let's talk about Paris. Mm-hmm. What do you think about this city?
Well, I love Paris.
Yeah.
Paris, I feel, especially living in D.C., where we do live in the city, but it's very suburban. You drive everywhere. You're in your car all the time. Paris, when I get here, I feel alive. Like I walk everywhere. There's so much to look at.
You're one of those. Mm-hmm. Me too. Just walking around looking. Do you take pictures as well?
Sometimes, but I really just love walking here.
Yeah. I was. I went exploring yesterday in the 18th, but not Montmartre. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking at a map of Paris, I was off to the west, like to the left of Montmartre. And I was just taking pictures of everything. I'm not a very good photographer, but I like taking pictures of things. And the amount of French people, like locals, who stopped and looked to see what I was taking pictures of, because it wasn't a touristy area. It was down beyond all that. And I wonder sometimes if the people who live here don't even know what's above them.
I think that's very true.
Yeah.
I mean, another thing I deeply love about Paris is the history, the way history is woven in to regular life.
How do you mean?
Well, not just, the historic buildings, but the names of streets or a cafe that was, has been there and used to be a coal shop
Right.
that has turned into a cafe.
And sometimes they keep the coal
Mm-hmm.
bit there, or, they turn a bakery into a clothes shop.
Charbonnerie, and
Yeah. How cool is that? You know what else we need to talk about? Jackie Onassis.
Oh, yes.
What's the deal here? You got...
So she lived here as a student. She was 20 years old. Her maiden name, Jacqueline Bouvier at the time. She spent a year here studying at the Sorbonne and Sciences Po and Reed Hall, which I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a huge center of American study here.
In Paris?
In Paris.
Okay.
It's where most of the American universities have their study abroad programs are housed
Reed
there.
Hall?
Mm-hmm. It's in the
Okay.
6th near Montparnasse, in Montparnasse.
Is it connected to the American University of Paris?
Not
No.
at all.
Okay.
Not at all. It is like a consortium of universities. I think the building may be owned by Columbia. It's
Okay.
where Grant is now at the Center for
Gotta get in
Ideas
contact
and
with Grant.
Imagination.
Yeah,
Yep.
Okay.
So she lived here and studied at all those different places, and it was a formative year for her. Like you and me, she loved Paris. And it became French and French culture and French movies and literature and history became an intellectual refuge for her during some of the darkest times of her life.
Right. And I don't think we mentioned the reason we're talking about her.
Oh, right. So there's two reasons. One is that I wrote an article following the footsteps of her in Paris. She lived in the 16th with a famille d'accueil, a host family, a countess who had fallen on hard times.
I love that as an idea.
Who was a spy during World War II and had been deported and sent to Ravensbrück, which was a women's concentration camp in Germany.
Right.
And it was a family that had really suffered during the war. It was such an interesting time of hope in France and in the world, but also very grim. There were a lot of ghosts that people were grappling with. There was still rationing, and there was still no heat, very little heat. There was no heat in the apartment, and so I spent, I followed in her footsteps. She loved horseback riding. I went horseback riding in the Bois de Boulogne, which was an amazing experience. And the article, really, I was not aware that that there was such passion for her story still. And a few days after it came out, or actually the day it came out, I was approached by my agent who wanted to know if I would be interested in writing more about it,
Cool.
something like a book-length project.
Wow.
And we put together a proposal, and I'm working now on a book about it. It's a novel about that year.
How cool.
And sort of a coming-of-age story of Jacqueline Bouvier here in France.
How wonderful. So that's something else we can look forward to.
Yeah.
I bet there's a lot of people out there listening who love Jackie Onassis.
Oh, I'm sure.
We say Jackie O, right?
Jackie O.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. Time's slipping away, though, Anne. Time is slipping away. What I think would be really fun is if I could convince you to hang around so we could do a bonus episode with some of the book club questions.
That would be great.
And get really nitty-gritty about books.
I would love that. I
Excellent.
love books.
Okay, me too. But let's finish on a question. I never asked anyone this one, but I can tell it's tough. For some reason, all the libraries are going to be destroyed tomorrow and all the bookshops. And they say, Anne, you can run in and grab one book about France or Paris. It can't be your own.
Well,
To read,
I definitely wouldn't grab my own.
to read and savor. Which would it be?
That is a really tough question.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
There is one book that I read for my research for The Lost Vintage that really haunts me. It's a memoir called Resistance, and the author's name is Agnès Humbert. She was a spy during the first part of the war, and then she was rounded up and put in prison. So it's about her active work as a resistant, and her rage and fury at watching what is happening to France. And then her endurance in the camps in Germany and Poland after that.
Right.
It's called Resistance.
Resistance. All the books and everything that we've been talking about, I'll put in the show notes below. Means just scroll up with your finger. If you're listening on your phone, you'll be able to find all these books. But Ann Mah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
No,
Oliver.
thank you for coming in, and I'm looking forward to getting my teeth into the lost vintage. All right, let's switch over to the book club conversation.
Okay.
And thank you so much for coming into the studio.
Thanks for having me.
So there you have it, Ann Mah. We continued the episode for the behind the scenes for the Patreon supporters. Patreon, who knows how you pronounce it, but that's where it is. And it was kind of cool. We went sort of really laid back, and I went through all the questions, and we sort of touched on a few of the other things that we talked about in the episode you've just heard. But before I get into Fat Tire and their Eiffel Tower tour that I did, I figured I'd do a little bit of the old Gmail where I read out an email or a well, no one's ever sent a letter in, I don't think. I think I got a card. I think I've got a card before, but never a letter. Not that I want letters. I think emails are quite good. Let's stick to the emails here. But I got one from Susan. Now, could it be Burrill? Burrill. Burrill. Susan Burrill. And she says, "Hello, Oliver. I've been enjoying your podcast for the past few months while I'm walking at lunch past the U.S. Capitol and around the National Mall." So I guess that means you're in Washington, D.C. Capital with an O. "I was sorry to hear that we're going to miss your event at the Australian Embassy. My husband and I arrive in Paris on October 29th. Darn!" It's a very American thing to say, darn. Darn. But I think I'm going to start using it. Anyway, I'm writing to ask you about... By the way, the event that Susan's talking about is the Patreon supporters huge meetup /show/cocktail soiree at the Australian Ambassador's residence on the 22nd of October. Sign up on Patreon and come and meet the ambassador. Anyway, says Susan, I'm writing to ask you about what happens on October 31st. Of course, here in the United States, it's Halloween, but in Paris, it's All Saints' Day. Is there anything special we should plan to do, watch, or see on that day? And then she says, I know it's a bit early to ask that, but she's learning as much as she can to be ready. Thanks very much. Patreon member from the US, Susan Burrell. Well, thank you for your support, Susan. You are making this show happen. You, specifically. Thank you. But in terms of your question about Halloween, All Saints' Day I don't think anyone really cares for. It's not a national holiday or anything as far as I know. I'm sure some people care about it, but Halloween is becoming a bigger and bigger deal here. So it's pretty common that you'll see parties, sort of younger people dressing up like they probably, maybe not like they do in America. I know in America it's all the kids, right? But here in Paris, sort of people who are aged between, 15 and 40, like go to parties, go to bars and dress up as, whatever they want to dress up. A friend of mine who I think listens to this show dressed up, and he's a guy, he dressed up as what's her name from Frozen? The girl from Frozen with the Elsa? So there's all kinds of nonsense happening in Paris too. In terms of things to go and see, I don't think there's so much of a spectacle that you can go and look at in terms of Halloween or All Saints' Day. But I'll keep an eye out and I'll share it with you if I can think of anything. But the real spectacle is seeing all the youngsters running around dressed up and the enormous queues out the front of the dress-up stores and the Halloween-y kind of stores, which are always empty all year, but then on the night of Halloween and the night before seem to go crazy. So there you go, Susan. Hope that helps. It wasn't very helpful, was it? But the answer is that it's not a major deal here like it is over in the States. Now, I want to talk to you about Fat Tire Tours. You guys who are new to the show probably have no idea what I'm talking about, but I used to do episodes every Monday. And then Fat Tire got in touch and they said, hey, we'd like to sponsor the show. I said, cool, I'll do an extra episode a week. And at the end of all the episodes, I'll talk about one of your tours that I've done. And that's exactly what we've been doing for the whole summer. And it's almost coming to an end. But I've got a few more trips to tell you about. Namely, the Skip the Line tour of the Eiffel Tower that I did the other day, which I can recommend because, well, firstly, I'd never been up the Eiffel Tower with a guide before. And I got Molly, lovely guide, who took me on the Segway tour as well. And also because it was cool I went up there by myself. With the tour group as well, but I wasn't with a friend or a family, which is how I sort of tend to climb the Eiffel Tower these days. Went up there by myself, listening to the tour guide, and it was really fascinating because you learn all the kinds of stuff that usually when you go up the Eiffel Tower, you just sort of look at the view, go, yeah, that's amazing. But Molly was there to explain it all, and I thought it was wonderful. And I figured when I was up there, I'd never really thought about what I like about being up the Eiffel Tower, and I'll give you my tip for what you should sort of seek out if you're going up there yourself, is while it's really lovely to be at the top and see the view of the whole of Paris, while that's awesome, I really like the second floor. When you're at that level, you sort of are quite close to all the rooftops, and you can kind of get... It's not so much about the scale, but you can get a better look at these beautiful Haussmannian buildings in the 7th arrondissement. And if you're any good at photography, you'll be able to zoom, point, and shoot and take a really nice picture. I found that to be the part that sort of really stayed with me, not to mention all the fun facts that Molly, our tour guide from Fat Tire, shared. Now, those fun facts I'm going to be sharing in the Instagram story as soon as I publish this episode, so keep your eyes peeled for that at the Eiffel Tower on Instagram. Go and give it a follow, but even better still, go and book a Fat Tire Tours. So you go on fattiretours.com, and then when you get to the checkout, there's a little thing on the bottom left that says, hey, do you have any discount code? Put the word Eiffel, boom, 10% taken off everything that you book. And that works all over the world, like New Orleans and Berlin, I don't know, everywhere. So go and check that out, fattiretours.com. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can find it nice and easy. So there you go. You guys know what to do. As for me, today's Thursday in Paris. I'm going to be heading to the BHV rooftop garden for an event. I'm going to be doing a tea tasting. So you would have known all about it if you'd signed up and become a member. If you are a member, I'll see you this afternoon. And I'm looking forward to making tea from ingredients grown in Paris on the rooftop of the biggest department store in the Marais. I will leave you guys with that. Au revoir, merci beaucoup for listening, and I'll talk to you again on Monday.